Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Senior Lakers Insider for ClutchPoints, joined on this fine. Well, it's less fine now, according to Lakers fans, I would imagine, because Mark Stein just reported the Warriors might be in the driver's seat for DeAnthony Melton, but it's still a fairly fine Tuesday afternoon. I'm joined on it by a friend of the show, friend of me personally, genuinely one of my favorite people in this entire industry, Jorge Sedano of ESPN, of ESPN Radio, of all over the place. George, thank you as always for popping on. Hope you're enjoying your off season. How you holding up?
I'm good. I was telling you off the air, I had an old man moment cleaning out the garage, 7 straight hours, and my back was paying for it for a day or two, but nothing that a couple of a leave every, for a couple days and some just stretching and ice didn't work itself out. So thankfully back and ready for summer league in a couple days.
Yeah, the garages are way less fun like at this stage of our lives than when we were kids. Yeah. It was like when we were kids, it was like, yeah, you move the cars and you got to shoot hoops when it was raining inside, and it was like you had your own little gym. When I grew up, my parents put a pool table eventually into their garage, so that was a nice. We had a fridge and we had a pool table, and in college, that was kind of the place to be for my friends and I. Nowadays, it's like lawn equipment and weird smells out here in Texas. We used to, in California, we would cut out a little chunk of the garage to keep some fresh air in there. Yeah. They don't do that out here because of snakes and bugs and all that crap. So, we paid a little extra for our 3-car garage, and it's like, it looks nice, but it just sucks to maintain.
It's not fun. Adulting is never fun. There's very few aspects of adulting that are actually fun.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better the older that you get. But all right, today on the show, we are going to be talking. George, I always like to say that I like to bring you on after these LeBron moments because I like to say that you speak LeBron.
You.
So we're going to talk a little bit about, the subtweets that flew a weekend or so ago. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about this grand Giannis plan for 2027. And, obviously how I think we're getting a taste of how LeBron feels about that by way of some of those subtweets. So we'll talk about that. Also, they have this guy Luka on their team.
Yeah,
who,
pretty good.
Probably has a couple thoughts about what he thinks about the Lakers potentially putting off competing to their fullest extent while they enact this Giannis or Jokic plan. So we'll talk about that. And also we have Summer League kicking off here in a matter of days. You're going to be there in covering it for doing play-by-play, actually, right? For ESPN for some of it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I think we have one of the most anticipated Summer League games in recent memory starting on Thursday.
Bronny versus Cooper.
Yeah. Bronny's look good.
He did look good against the Heat the other day. First play of the game, stealing a dunk, hit a couple threes. I thought he looked great. Look, and I think he's taking the right approach. I know people weren't necessarily maybe tuning in for a Bronny podcast here, but he's got a skill set that can be beneficial. Like when I talk to people around his orbit, like about what is a realistic goal, like as far as a career trajectory, and they referenced Avery Bradley, and I think he could be Avery Bradley. Sure, I think that's an attainable goal for someone like him, for sure.
I was most impressed by his motor. Like if he's going to go the Avery Bradley route, his motor needed to kick up a couple of notches compared to what we saw from him last year. But he was flying around the court in that game against Miami. And, obviously a lot of Lakers fans were tuning in there to see if Dalton Knecht wouldn't maybe turn things around there. And the thing that's driven me crazy with Dalton is he lacks that motor. He hasn't been playing very hard. He looks very disinterested out there.
I think he's still hurt. Don't you think he's still got to be a little hurt, like from what went down? Like there was
yeah, literally.
Like I don't mean like physically hurt. I mean emotionally hurt.
I was trying to think. Did I?
Yeah, no. I mean, I feel like it's pretty common knowledge that it took him a minute to just kind of rejoin the team and get in the right frame of mind. Yeah. So maybe that's part of it. Like, some guys get spooked when they get traded, or in this case, almost traded. And,
he was maybe literally traded. It was done. Yeah. So
maybe that's kind of messing with his head a little bit. But I will say this, I'm not like sounding alarms on Dalton Knecht yet. Like is there concern? I mean, it's 2 summer league games. Like if he plays the whole summer league and he's not very good, then there's some concern.
Yeah.
But because usually year 2 players, you want them to dominate. Like you want them to go out there, play 3 games in Vegas and call it a day.
And everybody else say like, all right, he's good. He doesn't need to be out here.
Right.
Yeah. The trade thing that derailed Lamar Odom's career when the Lakers traded him and he felt, betrayed by the Lakers for trading him. He got to Dallas. He was never quite the same. He has talked about that, really impacting him mentally and emotionally and all those things. And it for the only team you've ever played for the team that was so excited to draft you only a few months prior to turn around and trade you that same year, that would be kind of weird. And we'll see if he kind of gets, if he
welcome to the NBA.
It's so, dude, this business. Speaking of this business, another guy who I don't know that I would necessarily say he felt betrayed. I think he has definitely been surprised by his conversations and negotiations with the Lakers, in that there were actually negotiations. LeBron has spent his entire life he says jump, whole organizations, whole cities ask how high.
Right.
And especially here with the Lakers, he's been able to, lead GM has been a whole thing while he's been in LA. And this year, now I've said this a couple of times on the pod, and I'll break it down at least to the extent that I can. But from what I have heard, essentially LeBron and his team thought that they were going to get another 1-and-1 type deal with a no trade clause at or near the max. And whether they specifically asked for it and were told no, or it was never put on the table, that's where my understanding of the story gets a little fuzzy. From the Lakers standpoint, they didn't want to give him the full no trade clause because of the situation they kind of find themselves in right now. And they didn't feel all that comfortable with paying LeBron upwards of $60 to $65 million next season, because of his age and all of that stuff. And I think we've kind of had this kind of breakdown in communication. And I don't think it's necessarily all that surprising that LeBron would spend all of last weekend very publicly being in Cleveland and rocking the welcome home hat and taking pictures with actual Cleveland Cavaliers, albeit summer league editions. I don't know. It feels to me, and I've seen Wendy kind of say this too. It feels to me we're arriving kind of at the end of the story here between LeBron and the Lakers, one way or the other, whether it's asking for a trade this season or eventually retiring in the next couple of years. What has been your read of however, maybe not necessarily how things have gone down, but certainly LeBron's messaging and Rich Paul's quotes to ESPN at the time of them opting in, LeBron opting in the first place rather than opting out and usually getting the kind of deal he would normally get? Like, how has all of this gone down for you?
Well, I think your hunch about just his situation and in regards to it being perhaps the end of the relationship, I think I'm certainly leaning in that direction. I never try to be an absolutist, so I don't want to rule anything out because things can change fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But I would say that, yeah, it feels like this will be the end of LeBron with the Lakers. However, I will say that the stuff that was written in that Rich Paul memo, let's call it, or statement, whatever you want to call it, clearly shows the dissatisfaction that LeBron has with the current roster. And I think that if you're a Laker fan, you can be mad about that all you want, but he's not wrong. Like, I'll ask you, do you believe this is a championship roster as currently constituted? Even with, with the additions they've made over the last couple of days? Because, I mean, certainly at the time of writing, it wasn't that. And he had to have at least had some idea, while not being, quote unquote, clued in the way Luka is going to be clued in. He had to have at least some idea of what their potential maneuvers were going to be. And I'm assuming that based off that knowledge, he still felt similarly. Yeah, I agree with him. I don't think it's a championship roster. I think right now, maybe they're the fifth best team in the West. You can make an argument for, but probably more like the sixth best team in the West. Like, how do you feel?
Yeah, I don't even know if I would go fifth or sixth, like a specific number on it, but they're a tier or two down from OKC, Denver, and Houston, so. And
let's not forget Minnesota, who just beat them in a playoff series.
Beat the smoke out of them. Yeah. In that series. Here's that quote from, it's a little short to be a manifesto, but it's certainly, pointed. So, yes. Quote, this is from Rich Paul to ESPN, quote, LeBron wants to compete for a championship. He knows the Lakers are building for the future. He understands that, but he values a realistic chance of winning it all. We are very appreciative of the partnership that we've had, past tense, for 8 years with Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka, and consider the Lakers a critical part of his career. He continues, we understand the difficulty in winning now while preparing for the future. George, do they think Luka is like 19 years old?
No, but no, who are you saying? They, as in Rich Paul and LeBron?
No, I'm saying like the way that they're talking about the Lakers building for the future. And by the way, like you touched on LeBron not necessarily being clued in, but hearing stuff. If those of us who had been hearing that Dorian Finney-Smith was going to be gone days before that decision obviously was officially made, if a schmuck like me is hearing that,
know. Yes, of course,
they're hearing that. Yeah, and I would imagine of the guys that were on that team that LeBron would have liked to keep around, he probably felt like, yeah, Dorian was pretty good. He was one of 5 guys that I was ready to go to war with for an entire quarter of a playoff game.
Right.
So I'll go ahead and finish it up here. So we understand the difficulty in winning now while preparing for the future. We do want to evaluate what's best for LeBron at this stage of his life and career. He wants to make every season he has left count, and the Lakers understand that, are supportive, and what's best for him.
So the one thing that I also kind of gleaned off of that was he's basically implying, I mean, that the team that is all about winning championships on a year-to-year basis, like that's what their brand is, right? We are going to try to win a championship every year, is not in the business of trying to win a championship this year. That is what he's implying. Mm-hmm. So, and his representation is implying that through him via this statement. So it's an interesting game of chess because he's not wrong about any of those things. It is not a championship roster. And what he's implying seems to be the reality that they are, because you kind of alluded to it a moment ago about this 27 plan. That is a huge risk to take. When you have a guy who can be a free agent, next season or next offseason in Luka Doncic, the guy you're supposedly building around.
They're putting maybe an extension on his desk this year.
Right. Now maybe Pelinka and Bill Duffy are so good that they're willing to just say like, hey, we'll put the best team we can around him this year. But, in 27, we're going to go out there and we're going to get you Giannis. And it's like, I'm trying to think like, let's play this out for a second. Because look, I'm sure if Giannis, let me backtrack for a second. I think Giannis will be with Milwaukee until he can sign an extension. That's just my personal opinion. That is not a report. That is just reckless speculation on my part. Because the next contract he can get from Milwaukee is going to be so massive that we're going to be looking back going, holy smokes, he's making how much?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with that. Okay. I am a firm believer. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. It is just a guess on my part. But I think that it is hard for him to turn down that kind of money that he can get from Milwaukee, which then later he can turn around and say, okay, I want out. All right. So that's 2 years from now, basically, right? Where he can get out of that situation, which lines up in theory with what the Lakers potentially want to do. So let's play this out for a second. Let's say Luka does like a short-term deal, which is kind of smart, like a 3-year deal or whatever, or a 2 with an opt-out, whatever gets him to that 10-year service time that he can then get the super duper max of 35% because of years of service. Okay.
Yep.
Let's just say all that plays out. How do the Lakers intend on getting Giannis to LA? They're going to have to create what, 70 some odd $1 million in cap space. I don't know. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Maybe you can look them up. I mean, I don't know how that's plausible. Maybe it is. And I guess that's their feeling on Dorian Finney-Smith, that they don't want Dorian Finney-Smith and his contract, who wanted at least a 3-year deal, to be some sort of impediment to them potentially landing a superstar of that magnitude next to Luka Doncic.
Yep.
Okay. Who at that stage will be 33 years old, right? So that'll be kind of his last real run, we assume, at prime peak Giannis. But I still don't see how they get there, right? Because he'll be under contract. Yes, they'll be able to absorb the contract potentially. Let's make the argument they can.
Yeah.
What are the assets they're willing to trade to get Giannis? Like, how many picks will they have now in 2 years? How many more picks will they have? Because they're not willing to part with any at the moment. They have 21 and 32, but can only part with 1. So let's say 2 more years, right? 3 first rounders? Is 3 first rounders enough to get Giannis? Even at 33 years old? Like, I don't know if that's indeed the case. Maybe there's a way for them to collect more first rounders in a very creative deal somewhere, but I just don't see a real path where that makes a ton of sense, where I could say, oh, sure, Milwaukee will do that deal. And I think they're going to do right by Giannis whenever that time comes. I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't think they're going to do it, they're not going to do what Dallas did, you know what I'm saying, and not get the full value and extract the full value of what they can get for Giannis. And by the way, Giannis will have, again, multiple suitors of teams who are also championship ready, and he'll have his pick of the litter at that point.
That's the point. Giannis will have his pick of any number of situations. And that's where I say the Lakers and all of these teams. So historically, clearing your books, making yourself a threat to sign the player, that was the way to go out and get a star in prior CBAs, in prior
really
years.
up until like 2016, 17, in that range, right? Like 2018, whatever. Maybe even just before COVID, let's call it. Right.
Right. But recent circumstances matter to these guys. And if you're Giannis and you're leaving Milwaukee because you feel like they haven't maximized your time there, your opportunity there isn't maximized moving forward. And if the Lakers have basically been mediocre for the first couple of years of Luka, if I'm Giannis, I'm like, well, who's been better? Who has another super? Like, maybe you can't play with Luka in a different situation, but can I play in Denver where maybe they're a little bit more competitive? Can I go down to OKC? Can I go to New York where they are more competitive year in, year out? Can I go to Miami and play for somebody like Pat Riley, who was seemingly addicted to year in, year out competition and is absolutely against tanking or not even appearing to not be going for it? So it's like, to me, and it's a bit of a sea change here, because before, and frankly, in the NBA that Jeannie grew up in and that Rob was working as an agent in, that cap space was king. That was flexibility. But now the route to flexibility is employing as many good NBA players as you can that other teams are going to want. Because the other thing to keep in mind,
unreasonable contracts in theory.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's a very important part of it too. But like, look at all of these trades when superstar X is leaving. What do all, and this is an owner driven thing, but all of them, the one thing they all have in common is that notion in the immediate aftermath of, nope, we're not tanking. We're going to try to be competitive here. We're going to stick it to player X and show that we can be just as competitive without him. Now, they learn in very short order that actually it turns out you kind of need the superstar to be as good as you wanted to be. But all of like this notion that Milwaukee is just going to trade him into the Lakers cap space for a couple of picks and like Austin Reeves, that's not the trades that these teams have been making.
No. Again, and look, I get it. If you're a Lakers fan, man, you have lived a charmed life, to your point. Like, you have kind of alluded to it there. A great description of it. I mean, no, even in this era, like Luka literally falling from the sky, okay?
Yeah.
For
actual mana from heaven.
I remember having this conversation, okay, with someone. And I said to them, like, this is someone in Dallas's organization. I said to them, hey, man, let me ask you a question. Like, it wasn't even like a thought to like extract more. And the response I got was, well, you know, the Lakers were like, well, if we can't talk to him and we have to keep this hush hush, we can't give you everything because we don't know if he'll be willing to resign here.
Yep.
And in my head, I'm like, that's not your problem. You know what I mean? Like, so what I'm saying is I get it as a Lakers fan that you have lived a charmed life as recently as February. Okay. But I would also say that if you look at the last 10 years or so, you've had Luka and LeBron kind of fall in your lap, but there have been some hard times in those last.
Could we actually talk about Luka? Because like the Luka thing is actually worth bringing up. They don't get Luka if they don't employ Anthony Davis.
Correct. Right. Which gave you what you just said.
Dallas
you have to have a good player somebody wants. Right.
Yeah. And so and
Austin Reeves is not good enough to fetch you Giannis. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like that's exactly my point is that, because all of these teams, right, when Dame was available and Miami thought that they could get him for Nikola Jovic and like a couple of pennies that had fallen loose in Pat Riley's trunk like that, the Blazers were like, no, we're going to send him to Milwaukee and we're going to get, I think at the time it was Drew.
They got Holiday. Right? It was a multiple team trade. They got Holiday. And then they got Ayton, interestingly enough, which we can get to later. And they rerouted Holiday obviously to Boston, which backfired on Milwaukee in a big way. Like that was kind of a dumb move if you think about it, because you didn't realize that they were not going to keep him. He was not going to play there. By the way, I'm not even convinced, and I don't know this, again, more reckless speculation on my part. I'm not even convinced Holiday's going to play in Portland this time. But
nobody seems to know.
Yeah. So I think that I think all of these things are interesting in a lot of ways. But yes, like you have to feel like you get the deal that you want. And now I think it's a little different with Giannis, because he did bring them the first championship in 50 years. So you're going to work with him more so than Portland worked with Dame. Now, I still feel like the way Portland did it was kind of nasty to him, because it was like, yo, man, like clearly he never wanted to be in Milwaukee. And I think he is such a constant.
I think he was celebrating after they bought him out.
I mean,
doesn't indicate that.
Like, I mean, I had been saying that the whole time, but he's such a good dude and such a consummate professional that he was going to try to make it work. And people thought I was just like being a hater to Milwaukee. I'm like, what am I going to be a hater to Milwaukee for? Like, what do I care? Yeah. But when I said that, I said he doesn't want to be there. And it was fairly obvious those two didn't get along very well either. Not saying that there's bad blood, because there's a difference. Not saying that they weren't Shaq and Kobe hate each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. But they didn't vibe for whatever reason, both on and off the floor, to be honest with you. So I think that, that didn't work out well for Dame for a number of reasons. And now he's free and he gets to rehab and kind of pick up his career elsewhere. But just back to finishing that conversation, the Giannis thing, to me, it's a hell of a plan. And look, you mentioned Pat Riley. Pat Riley had a plan for LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. going back to like 2007 or 6 when Wade and them all signed those 3-year extensions. Remember?
Yeah.
They only signed a 3-year
extension
extension
of the
back then.
Olympic play.
So they were planning for that stuff years in advance. I get that. I've seen it happen. Okay. I covered those teams. So, but it was a lot easier to do it back then, to your point, because guys were just signing as free agents. And even that was super hard. Like we saw, today is the 15-year anniversary of the decision. Okay. Like it is, people don't realize how hard that was. Like nobody knew. 10 million people watched LeBron James on ESPN, like figure out what he was going to do from Greenwich, Connecticut at the Boys and Girls Club with Jim Gray asking him if he still bit his nails. Okay. Like we sat there for whatever it was, an hour.
Everybody else was biting their nails.
While everybody else was biting their nails. But like, that's kind of my point. Like it was just a different time. And even that was nearly impossible. Like what Pat Riley did and Dwayne Wade, obviously they did it in unison, was threading a needle. So now you're talking about trying to do that while also including assets involved. Like it's just way more complicated now than it has ever been.
Also, you're doing that. Like it was one thing for Miami to do that with Dwayne Wade, who was in on those conversations with LeBron, with Bosh, as they were kind of planning that out together. It's one thing because your superstar is in on it. And I'm not saying that the Lakers don't know that. I'm sure they've maybe talked to Luka and they've run a lot of the stuff by him. It's probably a pretty dangerous assumption to think that they haven't done those things. But he can sign an extension this summer. And if your attempt at getting him to sign that extension is so far we've let your best friend on the roster walk. We also kind of sort of crapped on him to other teams on his way out. Whoops. The big addition that we made is somebody you share an agency with. You do have DeAndre Ayton. You did get a starting center this year. That's great. And Jake LaRavia. Outside of that, that's our.
And we've also annoyed your co-host here. You know what I mean? Like
you're. By the way, you're like basketball idol, right? Somebody that he has probably waited his whole life to play with. He got to play with him for a few months, and now LeBron is subtweeting the organization. Luka's probably got to be looking around like, what? What did I mean,
I don't know. Listen, I don't know him.
No, I don't know either.
I don't know him at all. One would think that I would react that way. I'd be like, yo, what is going on here? You know what I'm saying? Like,
but it's that meme, like this how you live?
but maybe not. Maybe he's just like, whatever. It's his orbit. He cares about that, and that's it. And that is very plausible too. Like, let's not dismiss that. But getting back to LeBron, which is where we started. I just think that the marriage could be over sooner rather than later, clearly at this stage. And that was always going to be the case. So it's not like it's breaking news. But the way it's going down is kind of wild. I think that statement, it's funny because the statement came out at a time where nobody saw it coming. Now, obviously, Rich said that the Lakers knew that a statement was coming, and Luka got a heads up that the statement was coming. I don't know if they knew exactly what was coming in said statement. My guess is no, probably not. So whatever. But I do think that it just feels like, had they actually given some notice, if he indeed wanted to leave and that was the first line of business, they would have given people a heads up, and teams would not have made some of the moves they made leading up to that day. That might have paused free agency for a moment just so teams can make moves, including Cleveland, by the way. Now, I know that McMenamin and Windhorst have reported that there are teams that have picked up the phone to have conversations. But again, I feel like it would have been maybe a little different had there been more with the Lakers, heads up.
That was a part.
And by the way, that also leads me to believe that is not his initial intention to leave, that I think he prefers to stay. And this is now putting pressure on them in any way he can to make the roster better in what can be perceived as potentially his last year in LA.
You know what's funny, George, is that Lakers fans have a problem with him saying that. Like Lakers fans being like, No, LeBron, only we get to be frustrated with Rob Pelinka and him not wanting to do anything for 2 years while he employs Luka Doncic. How dare you? Like, it's like this whole marriage between LeBron and the Lakers and by extension Lakers fans has been awkward in some pockets of the fan base because of the guy behind me, you know. And the affinity that we all have for Kobe. Look, man, I was a Kobe guy. Like for probably far longer than otherwise, I thought Kobe was better than LeBron. And then eventually it was like, damn it. Shit, LeBron got him. But still, you know, there's a lot of people, my mom is one of them, who still to this day will absolutely not even like fathom the idea that maybe LeBron might be as good as Kobe, let alone better. And I think that's made for some of the awkward conversations here. I want to talk really quickly and bring this to your attention too. See if you took it the same way I did. This is from the Lakers official release after they signed DeAndre Ayton. This is a quote from Rob Pelinka. See if anything stands out to you here. Acquiring a starting caliber center was the top priority for us this offseason, and we believe DeAndre is an amazing solution to that objective and is an ideal player to add to our current core. DeAndre's size, mobility, and athleticism will allow both paint scoring and paint protection. DeAndre's playoff experience as a starter on an NBA Finals team also aligns with our ultimate Lakers championship aspirations. I felt
clearly that's a shot across the bow that we are building a championship team. This implication that we're not is untrue. Now, I'd say this, okay, and we can get into the DeAndre Ayton portion of the conversation. Yeah. No one has ever denied DeAndre Ayton's talent, okay?
Absolutely not, yeah.
And by the way, this is not an NBA thing only, okay? Go back to his college days, okay? Go back to even before that. You will find people in DeAndre Ayton's life that will question his care factor, okay? And that has always been something. I will tell you this. I will not name this person, but there was a person in the Phoenix Suns organization when DeAndre Ayton was there, post getting to the NBA Finals, in a year where he was, like, I think, in the bottom half rebound percentage rate, and all things considered. You know, he's a 7-foot center. And they had to like show him like, hey, man, look at where you rank. Okay. This isn't amongst centers. This is amongst the entire league. Like there's no way that you should be in the bottom half. And then he was motivated for a brief amount of time to rebound better. And it feels like you always have to dangle the carrot in front of him. And I just think that guys are cool with that for a little while. And then eventually they're just over it. And what I will tell you is, and that's both players, coaches alike, like, and I saw it. I have been in Phoenix a million times over these last couple of years. Okay. I have done a lot of Suns games over the years. I've seen a lot of coaches now. Okay. I was there with Monty. I was there with Frank. I was there with Budenholzer, and I'll be there with the next guy, I'm sure too. Well, maybe not, because they're not going to be very good, so they won't be on TV as much. But eventually, maybe they'll be good enough to be on TV, on national television. But my point is this. There has been a lot of conversation about DeAndre Ayton and his willingness to care about basketball. And I think that at some point after 7+ years or whatever it's been, you know, the guy is who he is. He is a formed player. Doesn't mean that he's not going to have moments of greatness, because even in Portland, where they literally paid him to go away, there were moments of greatness, okay? But they drafted 2, not 1, but 2 centers, okay?
In the last 2 years, yeah.
Correct. All right. Chauncey Billups, who I worked with and I love, and I will tell you this, he is a guy who can probably, certainly as a player, and I believe so as a coach as well, is very good at relating to players.
Yeah.
In a way that most people can't. I mean, the guy won a Finals MVP. Sorry, Lakers fans, I didn't mean to bring that part up, but you get my point. He is as accomplished a player as there was, right? Like he is, and a great leader, okay, as a player. And he was just like, nope, not happening. You know what I mean? So I feel bad for JJ Redick who I also care for as a former colleague, that I hope he doesn't have an aneurysm in the first few months of the season.
First few months
with DeAndre Ayton.
Maybe the first few possessions, because he's going to be like, DeAndre, get out of there. So
look,
damn it.
I am a big right, and then he has to look at the bench. Oh crap, it's Jackson Hayes. And here's the thing with DeAndre, because of that, because I had Tom Haberstroh on my radio show the other day, because we had Jason Quick first. So Jason Quick obviously wrote that most recent story about, why they got rid of him in Portland and whatnot. And Jason alluded to a lot of the stuff I've already mentioned, right? But that was fairly well known. He gave even greater detail to the specifics of Portland, okay? And, Haberstroh came on, and, he's taking a more analytical approach of DeAndre. And by the way, Haberstroh not only works for Yahoo nationally, but does Blazers games too.
Yep.
Like, he's their analytics guy. If you watch their broadcast, they will pipe him in to do like analytics in game. Yep. So he's seen DeAndre Ayton recently as well. And look, he will say when he's motivated, he kept using this phrase, when he's motivated, right? He can be a great player, et cetera, for X, Y, and Z reasons. And yes, again, we all know that. But again, it's this dangling of the carrot that you have to do with him that has got to be maddening at a certain point, because they're all grown-ass men, okay?
Yeah.
And Portland, not only did they jettison him, they also felt like he shouldn't be around their young guys because of his personality. So, look, can they extract good games out of him? Yes. He's going to have one game every 4 that you're going to be like, holy crap, that's why he was the number 1 pick. He's going to have like one game where you're going to be like, yeah, he's still a good player. And then there's going to be like 2 in there that you're going to be pulling your hair out. And it's just, that's what you need to be ready for, because even if it puts together a string of games to start the season, there's going to be an ebb and a flow to this, because that's just who he is from a personality standpoint. So if you're betting on an $8 million player at this stage who just got bought out for 36 or whatever it was, to have the light bulb go off, again, a risky bet, much like their risky bet for 2027.
Yeah, my one thing with Ayton, you talked about the carrot there a lot, and I agree completely that like everybody gets kind of sick of babysitting the millionaire, especially when the millionaire has the whole franchise kind of riding on his shoulders, right? Like when you take somebody first overall, you're hoping that person comes in and lifts everybody, not you're going to have to sit there and prop them up for as often as Phoenix felt like it had to.
Right.
The carrot here, though, is that like, hey, man, do you want to continue making tens of millions of dollars to play basketball? Because if this doesn't go well, you're a vet men guy from here on out. Mm-hmm. And ask Andre Drummond how he feels about that experience.
Oh, my God. A perfect example. Yes.
So, yeah, but to get back to it, and like if I'm LeBron and I'm sitting here saying, and what bothers me, I was having a conversation with somebody from the Lakers the other day, and we were having a back and forth, and I was like, put yourself in LeBron's shoes. You have held off father time in ways that we have literally never seen in the sport, ever. We have not seen anybody in their age 40 season be a even second team All-NBA player. He finished 6th in MVP voting, right? Which would have him, he was just on the cusp of a first team All-NBA inclusion. And all the while in the seasons leading up to this one, all the Lakers have done is just sit there and wait for him to show that slippage, and I'm not saying through message, because by message, they're behind him 100%. Holy crap. Their tweets with LeBron in them tend to do really well, where they're like, age 40, or take that father time, or whatever, caption that they throw on the videos that they put up on their accounts. But in terms of action, we can just call it. Actually, Jeannie actually spoke to this after they traded Anthony Davis, and essentially, without going so far as to use the specific language, basically admitted, yeah, we were kind of riding out the string with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And then Luka happened. And now we kind of have to reinvigorate ourselves and figure out how we're going to build around Luka right away. And if I'm LeBron, I'm like, well, then why did I work so hard to continue to be that good for you if you were just going to sit there and take advantage of it with the ticket sales and the engagement on your Twitter accounts and whatever, like all of the benefits of having me, but you're not going to actually compete. And then we finally get Luka Doncic, and it's the same messaging. It's the same thing where it's like, yeah, a couple years from now, we might be pretty good. And if I'm LeBron, if I'm Luka, if I'm either of them, I'm sitting here saying like, hold on, Luka, if he's in shape and engaged on defense and all that stuff, he has a case to be made as like a top 2 or 3 player in the NBA.
Yeah.
LeBron James in a playoff game, there are very few players, there are a few people on planet Earth I would rather have engaged and ready for a game 7 in the postseason than LeBron James. You have 2 of those guys on your roster right now. Maybe Giannis is in the distant future. Fine. But give it a go with these guys. Like, can we give them a full season with a serious roster? Let the 2 of them. The funny thing is, George, I've been hearing all summer to this point that LeBron and Luka have been talking back and forth about strategy. They've been talking about like what it would look like, what they could maybe run together. We saw that Luka recorded, did an episode of his pod. That wasn't, I don't think, at the end of the season, but we know that, like, I don't think they're as close as, say, LeBron and AD were when they were teammates because they don't share the agency, but they definitely want to try to compete together. Yes. I know Luka definitely wants to compete with his basketball idol in LeBron. Could we just see what that looks like? And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. And if I'm LeBron, I definitely feel like I'm taking crazy pills because Lakers fans are somehow angry at him for asking, hey, can we just give it a serious try with me and Luka?
Yeah. And that's where I started this conversation with you. Like, I don't think he's wrong about what he's saying.
Absolutely not.
And why wouldn't you? And clearly they took offense to his implication of they're not trying to chase a championship now by adding DeAndre Ayton, like, and making that like, come on, man. Like what, like, I get it. There wasn't anyone else available that you wanted or that you could land in for whatever reason. They wanted Brook Lopez for all intents and purposes. Ramona Shelburne has reported that the LeBron statement actually spooked Brook a little bit because the sense is LeBron may not be in LA, this year. And if that's the case, why would Brook want to come? Again, that's the report that Brook's like, if he's not there, I don't know if I want to be there.
Brook also feels a certain way about Rob Pelinka and the Lakers organization. He was there. Do you remember this? I think we might have been in the same place at the same time when I had this conversation. I feel like you might have been there, but I remember walking into either Thomas and Mack or one of those restaurants around Thomas and Mack. We were having a conversation and I was like, yeah, I really like the idea of like Brook is the perfect, especially as he's adding a 3-pointer. He's the perfect LeBron center. This is going to that is an absolute glove type fit. And the response that I got around the table was like, ooh, Brook hated it there. He's gone. And
didn't like it in LA. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Like he did not like it in LA. He was not very impressed by how the Lakers were being run in the 1 year.
Well, he was also there during a rough stretch. So there was that too.
Well, cause but that was at a time where, like Luke Walton was the head coach and he wasn't living up to the promise that he had coming out of Golden State. Remember, Magic wanted to fire Luke Walton. Now, I think this is a year later after they had gotten LeBron. But Magic wanted to fire Luke Walton and wasn't necessarily allowed to fire Luke Walton, and like that's
Magic also built a team with a bunch of ball handlers and Lance Stevenson and Michael Beasley and
the fart experiment.
Well, Rondo, but Rondo's like actually a good player in that sense. But when you had like LeBron, like once you had LeBron and Rondo, you really didn't need the other two. Like, what were you doing there? Why weren't there 3-and-D guys signed in those spots?
Well, they asked LeBron. I think McMenamin asked LeBron about it after the season, and I think LeBron farted into a microphone. But like the point that I'm making here with Brook, because even while it was kind of rumored that Brook and the Lakers, really wanted Brook, I think they wanted Brook at like 5.
They wanted him way less than what the Clippers gave him. Yes.
Yeah. So, and I think that was part of why I'll cop to being used for leverage there. That let's get a couple extra million from the Clippers. But the thing with Brook was always, Brook wants to be a Laker. Brook wants this. Brook is open to being a Laker. And I was always a little skeptical because he did not like it with the Lakers. I was like, that's a little weird, but he was always going to go to the highest bidder. And it turned out they weren't the highest bidder.
Correct. Yeah. But I do think he would have he would have taken the Lakers opportunity had he known for sure LeBron was going to be there. At least that's according to Ramona. And like, I trust Ramona's reporting there. So,
yeah. Last thing here before we get you out of here. We do have Summer League coming up, and it's a really exciting batch of Summer League games and stuff like that. You're calling, I believe, the second half of...
Yeah, I start on the 16th, so that Wednesday, and then through the end. And then I'll do sidelines for the semifinals and finals, but I'll still be calling, because there'll be games even those days. So I'll just be calling the games throughout, from Wednesday through Sunday, basically.
Do you recall the dinner that we were all out at when we found out about Kawhi?
Yes, I remember. There was a lot of people in that restaurant.
Yeah.
We were at, was it Momofuku? Is that where we were?
It was that burger joint that was in Circa, I think. It was
not in Circa. We were in Aria.
Okay.
Not Aria. Okay. No, well, what's the one with the big chandelier next door?
Yeah.
Cosmopolitan.
Yeah. That burger joint inside the Cosmo.
Yes.
And well, the reason I bring it up is because, I just wrote for ClutchPoints how like the Lakers are hoping to reignite their trade talks with like Miami and with some of these other teams around there. But I will never, ever, ever forget us sitting. It was you, me, Harrison, and True. And then there was all kinds of NBA personnel around us.
And the commotion at that time was insane. Everybody saw the alert at the exact same time. And everybody was just like, you could just like, it was like audible gasps and like people like going, what? Like cursing. Yeah. Like it was insane. Like it was legit something out of a movie.
True has like, we all know True's voice. He has this deep booming voice, and we're sitting there at the table. He goes, and oh man, Harrison and I had to run off and record an emergency episode.
Emergency pod. Had to leave the burger behind.
Yeah, so unfortunately, our times are going to overlap this time. Yeah. But yeah, I hope everybody does check out George's. I'm really excited for you to do play-by-play stuff, man. It always really inspires me the way that you continue to push yourself and try out these new things. You do play-by-play for football now, and you're doing play-by-play here for Summer League. I think it's really, really cool.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Well, it was always fun chatting with you. It'd been too long. Thankfully, this time I was home and not in some random hotel somewhere during the NBA season. So It was nice to do it from my home office. Hope everyone is great and you have a great rest of your show. I know I gotta answer like questions from your audience, but thanks for having me, and we'll talk soon. Let's talk before the season starts.
Thank you as always, man. I'll talk to you soon. And yeah, so what the plan is here, thank you, George, is to go ahead and I know a lot of you guys have questions with Mark Stein reporting that here's a quote: "The Warriors have emerged as a strong contender to bring back DeAnthony Melton in free agency," league sources tell the Stein line. In addition to Golden State's well-chronicled interest in signing Al Horford. So I can really quickly give you guys a little bit of information on that. As always, if you guys have super comments, that's the best way to, while I'm live, to get your questions covered here on the show. And unfortunately, like you guys can see, there are hundreds of comments here. So I'm not going to be able to scroll through them and find specific ones. But I'll just really quickly hit on this Melton situation, offer up what little I know about it, because even I'll admit that my understanding is a partial tidbit of the story. So we'll backtrack here a little bit. I think it was Dan Wojcicki of The Athletic. Dan, I'm sorry if on occasion I have referred to you as Dan Wojcicki of The Times. Still getting used to Dan Wojcicki of The Athletic had reported that the teams around the league were kind of connecting dots between the Lakers and DeAnthony Melton. So when I heard that, I contacted the few people that I know closer to the Lakers and asked, "Hey, what do you think about Melton?" And it was like, "Yeah, we like him. Good point of attack defender, good buy low candidate coming off of ACL surgery. Yeah, we're definitely interested in him. He has gotten to this point several offers from teams at or near the veteran minimum contract. And he has known this whole time the most that the Lakers could offer him. Not that they definitely did offer him the full $5.1 million biannual exception. But if they did want to offer it, that was the most that they could possibly give him. So if I'm DeAnthony Melton and I see teams out there, and especially the Golden State Warriors that I have a prior relationship with, that could spend a little bit more, I'm going to hold off for a little while and say, well, all right, if so long as that offer or something close to it is kind of waiting for me there, I'm going to see how the rest of this market goes. That's why oftentimes you'll see veteran minimum guys sign so late into the offseason because they're like, really, that's all I can get is a vet min? Well, I could sign that at any old time. I'm going to hold off and wait. And the Lakers also, from their side of things, are waiting because they want to see who all else gets bought out. Obviously, the DeAndre Ayton was a bit of a surprise to them. It was a fortunate surprise. They got lucky and they were able to add Ayton. And they're seeing if maybe that might be able to happen again, where there's all this obviously noise about Bradley Beal and whether he gets bought out and who he might sign with if he gets bought out. Marcus Smart is another guy that teams around the league are kind of keeping an eye on. Is that somebody who might get bought out? Nikola Vucevic of Chicago is somebody who, teams are kind of keeping an eye on as well to see what happens there. And essentially the way that in the NFL, what tends to happen with guys who might get traded is they will, it'll get floated. Team X is looking for trades, gauging the trade market for player Y. And they'll list the teams that player might get traded to. But what often winds up happening is the rest of the team just says, well, you're probably going to cut this guy anyway. So unless a team is so desperate to keep that player off of the free agent market after being waived, that's when they'll trade for a player. But usually if buyout negotiations or a player could potentially get waived, far more often than not, NFL teams will just kind of sit back and be like, well, we'll just wait and we'll see. We'll see if we can get you without giving up a 6th or 7th round pick or anything like that. So I think that's what's happening in the NBA, where you have teams are saying, well, I'll just wait. DeAndre Ayton got bought out. Damian Lillard got bought out and waived and stretched. Now you have Bradley Beal potentially in this buyout situation. So if you're looking and basically look around the league at any number of veterans who are in the final year of their contract on a team that might not be as interested in winning or might not win to the extent that player might like, or might have a young guy that might be taking some of the veterans minutes, look around the league. And I would imagine a lot of these teams are looking at that situation and wondering, well, I could trade for that player, which would involve giving up matching salary, which would involve giving up potential actual assets, or I can wait. And that's literally what happened with the Lakers. The Lakers, and the Blazers had talks about a DeAndre Ayton trade. And it was like, well, they don't want to take back Jared Vanderbilt's contract. They want our expiring money. I don't think Rui was ever seriously considered in a DeAndre Ayton trade, but it still would have taken 3 legit contracts. You wouldn't have been able to move Maxi Kleba and Gabe Vincent, as the Lakers can still move those guys right now. Uh, you know, this idea that we could either give up all that stuff and maybe a second rounder or a pick swap or something like that, or we could just wait and see how it goes on the open market. And I think the Lakers got a little lucky in that by the time Ayton hit the open market, Milwaukee had already made the move for Miles Turner, and that took that situation away as an option for Ayton, and the Lakers were able to benefit and get Ayton as a result of it. Now I think the Lakers are kind of looking at Washington and they're saying, what's gonna happen with Marcus Smart? They're looking at Phoenix and they're going, what might happen with Bradley Beal? What happens all over the league, right? And if you're going to be seriously involved in some of those conversations, you kind of need your biannual exception open. And I think the Lakers have I don't think they ever put the biannual. I can tell you, they never put the biannual exception on the table for DeAnthony Melton. Otherwise, it would have been signed already, I think. But the Lakers are just kind of sitting by and saying, well, let's see what happens with some of these other situations, and then the fallout from those situations. And then, maybe we come back to whatever player that we were thinking about signing that way. And I honestly think that's fairly smart. You're about to go to Vegas. I wrote about how the Lakers are looking forward to being able to have all of these options and conversations in person in Vegas. So yeah, I would probably say that. And by the way, it's also possible that DeAnthony Melton's agent is sitting here while all of these teams wait for Bradley Beal or wait for Marcus Smart or wait for all of these other options potentially to hit the buyout market. If I'm Melton's agent, I'm like, hello, I'm still here. And the way that you do that, if you're an agent, is to hold up the idea that, yeah, I might sign somewhere else. I might go. We already know that the Warriors like me, so I might do it. And it's not to say that he might, that isn't a real risk, that isn't a real opportunity. But yeah, this time of year, there's a lot of lying with like some of the conversations that I've had to this point. There's a lot of posturing and positioning and some of these things, whether it's agents or teams or players or whatever. And I think this is another one of those situations where a lot of people or a lot of entities in this situation, specifically with DeAnthony Melton, are looking at the current situation and saying, all right, well, how can I optimize the outcome of this situation for myself? And if I'm Melton's agent and I think I could get essentially the Jake LaRavia contract, and Al Horford can get the DeAndre Ayton contract, and that can be the outcome in Golden State, I'm at least going to float that to remind the Lakers, you guys were interested a little while, what's going on? And maybe get the Lakers to act a little bit more quickly. But as things stand, I do know that the Lakers are still interested in Ayton or Melton. They were still in on him as recently as last night. As Mark even says here, the Warriors have emerged as a strong contender to bring DeAnthony Melton back. That is contender, not favorite, not anything like that. Word usage is important there as well. I just think in this situation, in this CBA, in this new market, as everybody kind of charts out their course forward in this new CBA, sometimes patience is a bit of a virtue. And in this case with Melton, I think everybody is being as patient as they can be with, I think Melton's party getting a little anxious about how it might go. Ooh, there we go. All right. Is there anybody? I guess I could really quickly recap some of what I wrote here about. Let's see. I'll pull up my post here. I'll just put it in the comment section. All right. So, all right, Hydro, you can have yourself a nice day. All right. So here's what I wrote for the as the Lakers and the rest of the league embarks to Vegas. It was funny when I tweeted out what I was writing about, or tweeted out the link. One of my favorite, or some of my favorite comments were, oh, time for that rumor again. The Lakers are looking forward to having these negotiations in person. Look, it's funny that we have all paid close enough attention for long enough to understand the trends and how this tends to go here with the Lakers. And I also laugh about that stuff with Harrison, right? It's like, oh, we got that one again. It's like, yeah, it's that time of year. And so yeah, like that is something that this is a common refrain this time of year with the Lakers. Time is a flat circle. But I'm going to really quickly go through some of the names here that I talked about, and then I'll also break this down for the lowdown episode that I'll record after this. All right, so here's what I wrote. Previous trade targets include Andrew Wiggins and Robert Williams, among others, and a couple new names have garnered some attention given how the rest of the offseason has played out to this point. Sources say Matisse Thybulle, Marcus Smart, though most teams are watching to see if he's going to be bought out. Ayo Dosunmu and others are names the Lakers have had preliminary conversations with teams about availability and price, though no offers have been made. I don't like the way that I write these things. I always feel like I'm translating my own writing, or like the way that I even talk. That's not how I talk. Like preliminary conversations with teams about availability and price, like that's some tech bro speak. But anyway, that's the way that we have to talk about these things. I'll go really quickly through some of these new names. Obviously, Andrew Wiggins and Robert Williams, we have talked about before. Wiggins, especially, the Lakers are going to reopen those conversations and hope that Miami, especially by way of landing Norm Powell for basically a bag of chips and a future second round pick. That maybe Miami will be a little less ridiculous about Andrew Wiggins and demanding that they get Rui and Knecht and a first round pick and expiring money and all that stuff. Like that was never going to happen. The Lakers were never going to match that price. But the Wiggins thing, the Lakers are hoping that price would come down a little bit. Robert Williams is somebody that the Lakers also like, especially now that they have DeAndre Ayton and I guess to a lesser extent Jackson Hayes, though Portland really likes Robert Williams and they like having him there to support their young bigs that they have. Matisse Thybulle is somebody that Portland really likes as well. You guys heard Sean Highkin on the show last week or whenever I had him on talk about Thybulle and the way that Portland feels about him and how they don't feel the need to trade him right now. One thing to keep in mind with Portland is that they had a really good second half of the year and then immediately extended the contracts of Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups, which would indicate that at least heading into this upcoming season, Portland thinks that they can build on that momentum. They traded for Drew Holiday to try to make themselves better this year. So at least at the onset to the season, I would imagine Portland is going to want to hold on to Matisse Thybulle. But if the offer is just too good, then maybe Portland changes their tune on that and they give up Thybulle. But that's somebody that the Lakers like. He has utility as a perimeter defender, and he's also improved as a shooter over the years. So that's somebody they like. I've already talked plenty. There's a fly in my office again, and I put in one of those Zevo things to try to not have that happen again. But Marcus Smart, somebody I've talked about over the course of the show. That's somebody that I think the Lakers like quite a bit, but would prefer, oh my goodness, to get him on the buyout market. So I don't think the Lakers would give up anything specifically for Marcus Smart. Ayo Dosunmu is somebody who would be kind of like a LaRavia type acquisition where, oh my gosh, that's just always happen. But Dosunmu is somebody that the Lakers would like to bring in as not a buy low candidate because he's been pretty good to this point in his career, but the Bulls are a little hesitant to pay him the contract that he's looking to get after this season. And I think the Lakers also would be a little iffy about that, given that Giannis conversation that George and I just had. But he's young and he's going to grow, and he plays in a position of need, and I think would really complement some of the guys that the Lakers have in the backcourt as well. He's I like his game quite a bit. The Lakers seem to as well. So if the Lakers can take advantage of Chicago being cheap, that's what they're going to look to do. They've already done it once this offseason in getting a better draft pick by just sending Chicago some cash. But those are some of the things that the Lakers are trying to do. And in a more kind of macro sense, without talking about names specifically, they would like to make a 2-for-1 or maybe a 3-for-1 type of trade where they open up a couple of roster spots and they open up the full biannual exception so that you get whatever rotation player you trade for. And you also give yourself an opportunity to sign another rotation player with that biannual exception. And then you have a roster spot for another potential buyout over the course of the season, as well as some space between where you're at now and the first apron hard cap, and kind of enter the season that way. So that's where I'm at there. I hope you guys check out that article and give it a read and a share even. If you guys prefer my narrated version of it, I will record that literally right after I'm done with this. And this episode and that episode will go up onto the feed in short order. And yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in to this episode of the Lakers Lounge podcast. Thank you everybody. Thank you to Jorge Sedano for coming on. Always incredibly gracious with his time. I don't kid around when I say this. George has been, we've been friends since I was back in California, and he was giving me advice on how to grow in this industry back then. And he has been a really important voice to me ever since, and he'll remain as such for as long as he continues to answer my calls. So shouts to George for hopping on. Super duper nice guy. And I hope you guys check out his calls of the summer league while he is out there. But yeah, have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's. And Schmidtke, I don't think Drew Holiday is moving. I'm pretty sure Portland traded for him to make their team better this year. I don't know why, but they did. But have a good one, everybody.